You feel it in the quietest hours, a disconnect between who you are and what you're told to believe. It's like standing in a crowded room and hearing nothing but static. You crave something real, something that actually burns. But what if the source of that fire wasn't a book, but a man drowning in his own humanity? We treat these letters like monuments, cold, marble, stiff. We read them as if they were written from a desk in a palace by a man who had it all figured out. But that's the mistake. That's where we lose the thread. Forget the theology for a second. Forget the stained glass. Imagine a damp, dark cell in Rome. The air is heavy with the smell of wet stone and unwashed bodies. Your wrists are raw from the iron shackles. You're waiting for an executioner, but your mind is thousands of miles away, fixated on a group of people who are tearing themselves apart. That was Paul, not a saint on a pedestal. A man in pieces. He wasn't writing to dictate rules. He was writing because he was terrified that the spark he left behind in those cities, Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, was already fading. He was writing to keep the fire from going out. Maybe you know that feeling. The desperate need to scream across the void to someone you love, hoping they hear you before it's too late. You pick up the pen, your hand shaking, and you start to write. You don't care about the grammar. You don't care about the structure. You just need them to understand. When Paul wrote these letters, he wasn't thinking about the next 2,000 years of history. He was thinking about a house church in Galatia that was forgetting how to love. He was thinking about his friends in Philippi who were scared to death. He was lonely, and he was loud. We think these letters are about God, and sure, they are. But they are mostly about the struggle to keep that connection alive when everything, the culture, the distance, the fear is conspiring to break it. It's time we read them for what they really are, an SOS signal. Let's look at how this journey actually begins and why the first message wasn't what anyone expected. Think about the first time you were truly betrayed by someone you poured your soul into. You gave them everything. You trusted them with your secrets, your vision, your future, and then, in a blink, they turned. They walked away. Or worse, they started whispering lies about you behind your back. That's where we start. That's the raw, jagged edge of the early letters. When Paul writes to the Galatians, he's not acting like a polished philosopher. He's hurt. He's furious. You can almost feel his hand shaking as he presses the reed into the papyrus. He doesn't start with a polite, "I hope this finds you well." He skips the pleasantries. He cuts straight to the bone. "I am astonished," he writes. He's not just teaching theology. He's trying to drag his friends back from the edge of a cliff. He's watched them trade the freedom he fought for a cage of rules and performance, and it kills him. But here's what most people miss. This wasn't just about dogma. It was about belonging. You know that feeling when you realize someone you love is settling for less than what they're worth? When you see them shrinking themselves to fit into a mold that was never meant for them? That is the heart of the early letters. It's the scream of a father who sees his children walking into a fire. He's erratic. He's inconsistent. He's deeply, painfully human. He bounces from crushing grief to explosive joy, sometimes in the same paragraph. One moment he's lamenting his own shortcomings. The next he's boasting about the power he's tapped into. It's messy. It's unedited. And that is why it lasts. If he were perfect, we wouldn't care. We'd leave these letters in the dust of history. But he's not. He's a man who has lost his status, his reputation, his family, and his comfort, all for a singular, dangerous idea. He's writing from the front lines of an internal war. He's not observing the battle. He is the battle. And as you read through these early, panicked, urgent messages, you start to realize something shifts. He stops trying to just put out fires. He starts trying to build a foundation. He realizes that if he doesn't define the identity of these people, the world will do it for him. He's no longer just reacting to their mistakes. He's beginning to map out a new way to exist, but the pressure is building. The distance is growing. And the man who started out screaming at his friends is about to face the deepest silence of his life. This is where the story gets heavy. The lock clicks. It's a sound that ends lives. But for Paul, it was the sound that unlocked a different kind of reality. You spend your whole life running. You run from who you were. You run toward who you think you should be, but when you're thrown into the dark, there is nowhere left to run. This is the escalation. This is the quiet, suffocating pressure of his final years. He sits in the damp dark. The ink is drying. His hands are stiff. His back is a map of scars, and for the first time, the tone of the letters shifts. They're no longer frantic shouts to correct errors in far-off cities. They become haunting, beautiful meditations on what it means to be alive when you've lost every ounce of control. Think about that for a second. Most people, when they lose their power, they become bitter. They look at their scars and see evidence of failure. Paul? He looks at the heavy iron on his wrists, and he calls it a privilege. That's not sanity. That's something else. That is a man who has surrendered the fight against himself. And here is the friction point, the part that should make us uncomfortable. He writes about joy in a place where joy should be impossible. He writes about victory while waiting for the blade to fall. You know that voice in your head? The one that tells you your situation is hopeless? The one that whispers that your past is a weight you can never shed? Paul heard that voice too. He knew exactly who he was before he turned his life inside out. He knew he'd hunted people. He knew he'd stood by while others took their last breaths. He knew the blood was on his hands, and that is the true, crushing conflict. Every night in that cold, windowless cell, he wasn't just fighting the Roman Empire. He was fighting the ghost of his own memory. He was trying to convince himself that the grace he preached was big enough to swallow the monster he used to be. That's the escalation of the stakes. It's not a religious debate anymore. It is a life or death struggle for his own soul. As he writes, the words become shorter, more urgent, more personal. He stops writing to them. He starts writing to you. He's trying to leave a blueprint for survival, a way to hold on to light when the world around you is turning into a tomb. He knows the end is close. He can hear the rhythm of the guard's footsteps in the hall, but he doesn't stop. He keeps pushing, keeps refining, keeps stripping away the ego until there is nothing left but the raw, unfiltered truth of why he started this in the first place. And then, just before the final curtain falls, he looks back at the only thing that ever mattered. The ink finally dries on the parchment. The scroll is rolled, tied, and handed to a courier who has no idea he's carrying a document that will outlive empires. The footsteps outside the cell stop. The heavy lock turns one last time, and in that moment, the fear vanishes. The trembling hands go still. Paul isn't writing for the history books. He wasn't thinking about the theologians or the critics who would spend centuries dissecting his every comma. He was thinking about you. He was thinking about that exact moment when you feel like you're fading. Remember that static we started with? That feeling of standing in a crowded room, disconnected from everyone around you? Paul figured out the secret. He realized that the static wasn't the problem. The noise was. And the only way to cut through the noise is to stop trying to perform. Stop trying to justify, and just start being honest about your own brokenness. He didn't leave us a perfect roadmap. He left us his vulnerability. He showed us that you don't need to be strong to be heard. You just need to be real. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be willing to ask the questions, even when the answers scare you. He spent his life building a bridge between heaven and the dirt he was dragged through. And now, the bridge is finished. The letters are the footprint of a man who refused to let the darkness have the final word. So, here is what most people miss. They think these letters are a mirror to look at yourself. They aren't. They're a window. Look through them. Look past the rules, the ancient context, the debate. Look at the man. See the man who was terrified, lonely, and bleeding, and yet completely, undeniably free. If he could find that freedom in a Roman dungeon, chained to a guard, waiting for the end. What is stopping you from finding it right where you are? You are not defined by the walls around you. You are defined by what you choose to whisper into the dark. So maybe don't just read the words next time. Listen for the man behind them. He's still talking. If you're quiet enough, you'll hear it. It's not a sermon. It's a whisper from a friend who's already made it to the other side. And that changes everything.